Close your eyes and imagine that the world you know, the cities, the roads, the soft hum of electricity threading through walls has simply dissolved. There is no concrete beneath you. There is no glass in the windows because there are no windows because there are no buildings. There is no sky as you understand it, framed and managed by architecture. The sky above you is a cathedral without walls, without ceiling, without end. You are lying on soft ground. The ground beneath you is warm, not unpleasantly so, but with a deep, contained heat, the kind that radiates from stone that has spent all day drinking in sunlight and now breathes it back slowly, gently, like a sleeping body. You feel it through your back, through your shoulders, through the soles of your feet. The warmth is ancient. The warmth has been here longer than anything you can name. The air around you is thick, not oppressively so, not the wet, heavy press of a summer storm about to break, but full, textured, alive with humidity and oxygen, and the faint green perfume of things growing. Every breath you take is rich with something you cannot quite identify, something older than language, older than memory, older than the very concept of breathing being a thing that creatures do to stay alive. You are lying in the Jurassic period, not as a visitor, not as a time traveler clutching a machine. You are simply here, in the way that a dreamer is simply in a dream, arrived without arrival, present without the mechanics of presence. The year, if years existed here, would be somewhere between 175 million and 200 million years ago. The continents beneath you are not the continents you know. The ocean currents that govern the world's temperature have not yet been carved into their familiar channels. The magnetic poles are where they are, drawing invisible lines through the planet's molten heart, but they are not quite where you expect them. And you are here, breathing the old air, listening to the old night. Let yourself settle into the ground. Let the warmth of the ancient earth rise up through you. There is nothing required of you in this moment. Nothing to remember, nothing to plan, nothing to accomplish. The Jurassic does not ask anything of you. It existed for millions of years before the first creature capable of asking questions ever drew breath. It will continue in geological memory, in stone, in the compressed and altered remains of everything that ever lived here, long after the last question has been asked and the last answer has faded into silence. You are safe here in the deep past. Let me tell you about this world. Let me tell you about all the things that made it dangerous, and in understanding their danger, in cataloging the 1,000 ways this ancient earth could end a life, perhaps you will feel, paradoxically, the most extraordinary peace, because none of it can touch you. You are lying here in the soft embrace of deep time, and the danger is beautiful, and it is very far away, and the world it inhabited is gone so completely that its absence is itself a kind of silence. Breathe. Let the Jurassic night settle around you. We have so much to explore. Chapter 1. The atmosphere breathing in a different world. The first thing that would kill you in the Jurassic, if you were truly there, is something you cannot see, something you cannot smell, something you can only feel in the slow, confused suffocation of your body failing to process the air it has been given. The atmosphere of the Jurassic Earth was not the atmosphere of the world you inhabit. Oh, it was air, it was indisputably air. It moved and pressed and filled the spaces between things in the way that air does. It had nitrogen, and it had oxygen, and it had carbon dioxide. But the proportions were different. The balance was struck differently, on different scales, according to different rules that had been established over hundreds of millions of years of planetary chemistry and biological evolution. Oxygen levels in the Jurassic atmosphere were lower than they are today, according to many geological models. Where modern air sits at roughly 21% oxygen, Jurassic air may have hovered somewhere between 17 and 19%, depending on which era within the Jurassic we are discussing, depending on which models we trust, depending on what the fossil record tells us about the kinds of organisms that were breathing it, and what those organisms needed to breathe. Lower oxygen means that every breath you take gives your body slightly less of what it is trained to use. Not enough less to be immediately lethal. You would not fall down at the first inhale, but enough less that, over hours and days, you would feel the altitude sickness of a place that is not high above sea level, but is nonetheless depriving your blood of something it expects. Your heart would work harder. Your muscles would fatigue more quickly. The deep, dreamless sleep that your body craves after a long day would come sooner, last longer, leave you more confused upon waking. You would move through the Jurassic as though through water, not drowning, but weighted, slowed, the world slightly dimmer at its edges. But there was more oxygen in the story than that simple fact suggests, because we are not talking about oxygen alone. The carbon dioxide levels in the Jurassic atmosphere were, by modern standards, extraordinary. Some estimates place Jurassic atmospheric carbon dioxide at between 4 and 8 times the current level, perhaps 1,600 parts per million, perhaps higher, in some periods in some regions. Modern air carries approximately 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide. You can breathe in 2,000 parts per million for some time before you begin to feel it: headaches, difficulty concentrating, a creeping lassitude, the sense that your thoughts are wrapped in gauze. At 5,000 parts per million, the human body begins to protest in earnest. Dizziness, nausea, the slow erosion of clear cognition. The Jurassic greenhouse was not, perhaps, immediately fatal to a human visitor, but it was not comfortable. The air you breathed would taste different, slightly acidic, slightly sweet in the strange way that CO2 rich air sometimes tastes, as though the atmosphere itself has been breathing out and not yet breathing in. The warmth of the climate, which we will discuss in more detail, was in part a product of this greenhouse, this thick blanket of carbon dioxide and other gases wrapped around the planet, holding in the sun's heat with extraordinary efficiency. And then there were the other things in the air. Spores. The Jurassic world was, in many regions, a world of ferns and cycads and seed ferns and horsetails and early conifers, and all of these plants reproduced in part through spores and pollen, clouds of reproductive material dispersed on every passing breeze with a generosity that borders on the absurd. The air in certain seasons, in certain regions, would have been thick with this fine organic dust, not dangerous in the way that chemical toxins are dangerous, but an irritant, an allergen, a constant presence in every breath that your immune system, evolved over millions of years of human history, would not have been prepared to process. Fungal spores, too. The decomposer networks of the Jurassic forests were vast and complex, and the fungi that broke down fallen trees and dead leaves, and the carcasses of animals released spores with the same extravagant generosity as the plants. Many of these spores would have been harmless. Some might not have been, in sufficient concentration, breathed in day after day by lungs that had no prior exposure and no practiced immune response. The microbial world is the oldest world, and the Jurassic was full of microbes, in the soil, in the water, in the air, on every surface of every leaf and stone. The diseases those microbes could cause, in a body that had evolved no defenses against Jurassic pathogens, represent perhaps one of the most quietly terrifying hazards of deep time travel. But we will come to the microbial world in its own chapter. For now, simply breathe. Breathe the slightly different air of this different world. Notice how it fills your lungs, not wrong, not poisonous, not immediately threatening, but subtly, persistently, unfamiliarly other. Notice how the warm thickness of it settles in your chest like something well-meaning but over-present, a kindness that is just slightly too much. Let it slow you down. That slowing, that beautiful, drowsy slowing, is part of the gift of the Jurassic atmosphere. The world is telling your body, gently and without malice, that it needs to rest. The ancient air has no argument with you. It was here first, and it will be here long after you have returned to the present, and right now in this moment. It simply wants to hold you in its warm, slightly heavy, profoundly old embrace. Rest in it. Let the CO2 rich Jurassic night settle into your breathing. In slowly. out even more slowly. The world is 200 million years old and it is not finished yet. There is so much more to tell you, but the telling can wait just a little while for the breathing to become effortless. You are lying on the warm Jurassic ground. The air is full and ancient and alive. Breathe. Chapter 2. The Heat, a world without polar ice. There are no ice caps in the Jurassic. Let that sentence settle into you the way warmth settles into cold hands slowly, spreading from the center outward, changing the texture of everything it touches. There are no ice caps. There are no glaciers grinding slow paths down mountain valleys. There are no permafrost zones where the soil below a certain depth never thaws, never releases its frozen grip on the organic matter it holds. The poles of the Jurassic Earth are cold by the standards of the tropics, cold by the standards of the mid-latitudes, but they are not the ice-locked wastelands that the poles of your world have been for most of recent human memory. They are cold, temperate regions, perhaps not unlike the Scotland or Patagonia of your era in their general character, forested, damp, seasonally dark, but not glaciated. The planet is warm, deeply, thoroughly, globally warm. Global average surface temperatures in the Jurassic were somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius higher than they are in the modern era, and that modern era baseline itself, you should know, is already warmer than it has been for most of the last few million years of glacial cycling. The Jurassic warmth was not the warmth of a summer day. It was the warmth of a fundamental planetary configuration, a world in a different relationship with its own greenhouse gases, a world whose ocean circulation patterns had not yet established the cold, deep-water conveyor belts that moderate temperatures in the modern era. The oceans were warm, not just warm at the surface, warm deep down, warm in the benthic zones where modern deep water is so cold it barely stays liquid. The deep Jurassic Ocean was perhaps 15 degrees Celsius, where modern deep water sits at 2 or 3 degrees. This meant that the enormous thermal reservoir of the world's oceans, which in the modern era acts as a moderating influence, soaking up heat and releasing it slowly, was itself warm, adding to rather than dampening the global temperature signal. What does this mean for the world you are lying in? It means that even at night, even in the cooling that follows sunset, the world does not get as cold as you might expect. The nights in the Jurassic are warm in a way that the nights of temperate regions in the modern era rarely are. There is warmth in the ground beneath you, stored there by days of intense sunshine filtered through that dense, CO2-rich atmosphere. There is warmth in the air around you, held by a greenhouse blanket more comprehensive than anything in the modern world outside of Venus. There is warmth radiating from every leaf, every stone, every breath of every living thing within range. You might think this is comfortable. In some ways it is. The chill that is the enemy of sleep, that crawling cold that enters the body through the feet and the shoulders and refuses to leave, that requires blankets and warm drinks and the radiated heat of another body to dispel, that chill does not exist here. The Jurassic night does not bite, it holds. But the warmth has its costs. Humidity is the companion of warmth, in a world with warm oceans and no polar ice to pull moisture from circulation. The Jurassic air was wet in the way that tropical rainforests are wet, where every surface is damp, where fungi grow on fallen logs within hours, where the distinction between the air and the water becomes academic. In many regions, particularly in the lower latitudes and along coastlines, the humidity would have been extraordinary, 90%, 95%. The air so laden with moisture that breathing it was almost like drinking it. This humidity is not just uncomfortable. It is a medium for life, specifically for microbial life, for fungal life, for the invisible ecosystem of decomposers and pathogens that thrive in exactly this warm and wet combination that the Jurassic provided in such abundance. Every surface you rest against in the humid Jurassic night is a culture medium. Every breath you take is full of things that love warmth and moisture, that have evolved over hundreds of millions of years to take advantage of exactly the conditions you find yourself in. We will get to the microbes. We always get to the microbes. But first, let the warmth be what it is: beautiful, enveloping, generous. The Jurassic night is warm. The ground beneath you holds the day's heat like a mother holds a sleeping child, not tightly, not possessively, but with a gentle, continuous pressure that says, "You are here, and the world knows you are here, and the world is not cold toward you." The stars above you, and there are stars, more stars than you have ever seen in the light-polluted darkness of your own era, stars in their hundreds of millions burning with their familiar indifference, are the same stars, more or less, that you know. They move across the sky a little differently, because the Earth's rotation in the Jurassic was slightly faster than it is today. The day was perhaps 22 or 23 hours long, the tidal breaking of the moon not yet having slowed the planet to its modern pace. The moon itself was a little closer, a little larger in the sky, its face already carrying most of the craters you know, but perhaps with different coloring, different albedo, the dust of its surface not yet having settled into its current configuration after the last great bombardments. But the warmth is real, and the warmth is constant, and in the warmth you are allowed to close your eyes. The heat danger of the Jurassic, and it was a danger, not in some abstract geological sense, but in the immediate physiological sense of a warm-blooded mammal, or mammal precursor trying to survive, was not the heat of high temperatures so much as the heat of relentlessness. The cool seasons in the Jurassic were not cold. The night was not a refuge from daytime heat in the way that desert nights are a refuge. The warmth was always there, always pressing, always insisting on itself. For the small creatures of the Jurassic, the mammals and mammal-like animals that were our ancestors in this era, creatures roughly the size of shrews and rats and small opossums, nocturnal and burrowing and cautious. This relentless warmth created specific challenges. They needed to stay cool enough to think clearly, to run fast enough to escape predators, to digest food efficiently. Their body temperature regulation systems, which modern mammals inherit and which you yourself rely on every moment of every day, were under constant pressure in the Jurassic warmth. But this is not your concern right now. You are not being asked to regulate your body temperature. You are not being asked to run from anything. You are simply here in the warmth, and the warmth is enough. Let your muscles relax one by one, starting with the small muscles around your eyes, the tiny, complicated muscles that have been holding your expression together all day, the muscles of concentration and attention and social performance. Let them go. Let your face become a landscape, rather than a mask. Let the warmth of the Jurassic night take your shoulders next. Feel them drop, just a fraction of an inch, the chronic tension of modern posture dissolving in this ancient heat. The dinosaurs had no desks to hunch over. The pterosaurs had no screens to squint at. The warmth of this world is the warmth of bodies that moved freely through large spaces, of muscles that were used for running and swimming and climbing, and not for the sustained, static contractions of sedentary alertness. Your body remembers this warmth, somewhere deep in its evolutionary memory. Your cells, tracing their lineage back through every ancestor you have ever had, were shaped in worlds not entirely unlike this one. The warmth is not alien to you. The warmth is a homecoming. Sink into it. Let the Jurassic night hold you. Chapter 3. The Seas, Ancient Water and Its Creatures. The Jurassic seas were not your seas. Lying here on the ancient ground, you may be far from the ocean, or you may be near it. The geography of the Jurassic world was radically different from the geography of the modern era. The great supercontinent of Pangaea, which dominated the Triassic period before the Jurassic, was in the process of breaking apart during the Jurassic, cracking along vast geological seams. The pieces drifting on the slow convective currents of the mantle, creating new coastlines and new ocean basins as they went. The Tethys Sea stretched across what would one day become southern Europe and the Middle East. The nascent Atlantic Ocean was opening, a thin crack between what would become the Americas on one side and Europe and Africa on the other. The seas covered more of the planet than they do today. The lack of polar ice meant that sea levels were higher, perhaps tens of meters higher than the present day, enough to drown entire continental shelves, to push coastlines far inland, to create vast shallow epicontinental seas that flooded the interiors of landmasses and teemed with extraordinary life. These shallow seas were warm from above, heated by a tropical and subtropical sun in an atmosphere with minimal cooling from ice age dynamics. Warm from below in some regions by volcanic and hydrothermal activity along the mid-ocean ridges that were being created as Pangaea split apart. The water temperature in shallow Jurassic seas was perhaps 30 degrees Celsius or more in the tropics, warmer than modern Caribbean waters, warmer than the warmest bath you have ever taken that still felt pleasant. In this warmth, life was extraordinary. The Jurassic seas were full of creatures that would be entirely alien to a modern eye, and yet recognizable in the way that distant family is recognizable. You can see the resemblance, even through the profound differences. Ammonites were everywhere. These were mollusks, relatives of the modern nautilus, though more diverse and more spectacular, the nautilus being a kind of understudy who survived the extinction events that took the main cast. Ammonites came in sizes ranging from a few centimeters across to several meters in diameter, great coiled shells, ribbed and ridged and ornamented with a complexity that suggests life had been trying to perfect the spiral for hundreds of millions of years, and was well on its way to achieving it. They floated and swam in the upper layers of the ocean, trailing tentacles, filling niches that modern squid and fish occupy, filling the water column with their slow, spinning presence. Below them on the seafloor were other mollusks, belemnites, which looked somewhat like modern squid except with a solid internal calcite shell, a rostrum or guard that sometimes fossilizes in the billions, creating layers of rock that are almost entirely composed of these cigar-shaped remnants of ancient cephalopods. Bivalves in enormous variety, gastropods tracing their patient courses across the seafloor. Sea lilies, crinoids, anchored in meadows on the bottom, their feathery arms extended in the current to catch whatever drifted past, so numerous in some areas that their fossilized remains form entire limestone formations. But the creatures that define the Jurassic seas in the imagination are the large ones, the predatory ones, the ones that would have made a human swimmer understand immediately, in the most visceral possible way, that this was not their sea. The ichthyosaurs were here. These were reptiles, air breathers, like you, that had returned to the sea perhaps 150 million years before the Jurassic, adapting so thoroughly to aquatic life that they had become superficially fish-shaped. Streamlined bodies, dorsal fins, fluke tails, eyes that were enormous, adapted to seeing in deep water where light is a commodity and darkness is the rule. The largest Jurassic ichthyosaurs were several meters long. They moved through the warm, shallow seas with the effortless speed of something that had been shaped for this specific environment over millions of generations. They ate fish and ammonites and belemnites and whatever else presented itself in the right size range. For a human in the water, an ichthyosaur encounter would have been the most one-sided confrontation imaginable. Not because of malice, these creatures had no concept of human beings, no learned aggression toward anything on their evolutionary scale of recognition, but because of capability. The ichthyosaur in the water was home. The human in the water was not. The ichthyosaur's body was optimized for this environment in ways that a human body, which has been optimizing for terrestrial life for 4 million years, simply could not match. Speed, maneuverability, sensory perception in the water, all of these belong to the ichthyosaur with a completeness that no human swimmer could challenge. But the ichthyosaurs were not the only large marine predators of the Jurassic. The plesiosaurs were here too, long-necked creatures with bodies like barrels, 4 large paddles driving them through the water, their necks extending to startling lengths in some species to allow them to strike at fish from above while their bodies remain too deep to be seen. There were also the pliosaurs, a related group, but with short necks and massive heads, the deep ocean predators, the things that ate other large marine reptiles and thought nothing of it. Leopleurodon is the most famous of these, thanks to popular media, though the legendary dimensions sometimes attributed to it are exaggerated. Still, a pliosaur of the Jurassic seas, with its teeth the size of bananas, its bite force sufficient to crush whatever it chose to crush, its bulk moving through warm water with terrible purpose. This was a creature that established danger as a physical fact, not a theoretical concern. But you are not in the water. You are here, on the warm ground, listening to the distant sound of the ancient sea. From far away, if the wind is right, you might hear the ocean, not the rhythmic pounding of modern surf against rocky coasts. The coastline here is different, the sea depths shallower in many places, the wave dynamics altered by continental configurations that have not yet settled into the modern arrangement. But some version of it, the constant conversation between water and land, the hissing and sighing that has been going on since the oceans first condensed from the cooling planetary surface 4 billion years ago. The sound of the ancient sea, carried to you on warm, moisture-laden air, is perhaps the oldest lullaby. It has been playing since before there were ears to hear it. It will continue playing long after the last ear has closed. Let it reach you, across whatever distance separates you from the shoreline of this vanished world. Let it be the sound underneath all other sounds, the ocean's patient breathing, older than anything that has ever lived, continuing its conversation with the shore in the quiet dark of the Jurassic night. Breathe with it. In with the wave. Out with the retreat. In. Out. The sea is ancient and it is still, and you are on the shore of the deepest past, and the water does not remember you because it does not yet know that creatures like you will one day exist, and that unknowing is its own kind of peace. Chapter 4, VOLCNOES and the Living Earth. The ground beneath you is not stable, not in the way that instability is a threat, nothing is about to open up and swallow you, but in the way that ground is never, on geological timescales, truly still. The Jurassic Earth was geologically active in ways that exceed the modern era. The breakup of Pangaea, that vast, slow pulling apart of the supercontinent that dominated the Triassic, was driven by mantle convection, by the great upwellings of semi-molten rock beneath the crust that pushed the pieces apart like objects on the surface of a boiling liquid. Where these upwellings reached the surface, volcanoes formed. Along the rifts and seams where continents separated, magma welled up to fill the gap, creating new ocean floor, building mid-ocean ridges, occasionally surfacing in spectacular volcanic events. The Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, a volcanic event that had begun at the Triassic-Jurassic boundary, helping to end the Triassic world in a blaze of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, was still, in the early Jurassic, a relatively recent memory in the rock record. Its effects had helped reshape the world, killing perhaps half of all species and leaving the ecological stage clear for the dinosaurs' eventual dominance. The volcanic ghost of that catastrophe lingered in the atmosphere and the soils. Throughout the Jurassic, volcanic activity continued to shape the world. Mid-ocean ridges built and expanded, subduction zones, where one piece of oceanic crust dived beneath another, dragged down by its own weight into the hot mantle, generated arc volcanoes along continental margins, chains of fire that burned in the geological record as layers of ash in sediment cores. The western coast of what would one day become North America was a zone of active volcanism. As oceanic crust dived beneath the continent, and generated the early roots of what would eventually become the Sierra Nevada and other mountain ranges. From a distance, if you were standing in the right place on the right day in the Jurassic, you might have been able to see a volcanic eruption. Not necessarily the catastrophic, civilization-ending eruption of popular imagination, though those happen too at the right moments in the right places, but the ordinary, continuous volcanism of an active planet. The glow on the horizon, the smell of sulfur on the wind, the fine ash that sometimes fell like gray snow, coating leaves and water, and the upturned faces of animals who had never seen such a thing and could not have named it. The ash from volcanic eruptions was a nuisance in the short term and a catastrophe in the medium term if eruptions were large enough. It blocked sunlight, reducing photosynthesis, starving the base of the food chain. It acidified water sources. It coated the lungs of animals who breathed it. Large eruptions could cause regional ecological collapse, the kind that left layers in the rock record, thin dark bands where normal sedimentation was interrupted by catastrophe, bands that geologists read like sentences in the story of the world. But on a quiet night, far from the nearest active volcano, the deep geological activity of the Jurassic Earth is felt more than seen or heard. You feel it in the warmth of the ground. You feel it in the slight sulfuric edge to the air, if the wind has been carrying news from distant vents. You feel it in the very solidity of the world beneath you, the sense that this ground is not given, that it is not permanent in the way that permanence implies something fixed forever, but that it is a temporary configuration of matter and energy in a planet that is still actively figuring itself out. There is something comforting in this if you let it be. The Earth beneath you is alive. It has been alive for 4.5 billion years, alive in the geological sense, in the sense of heat and movement and chemical activity that is incomprehensible in its scale and duration. The volcanoes are not threats to you tonight. They are expressions of a planet doing what planets do, cycling matter and energy, building mountains and tearing them down, creating ocean floor and consuming it, breathing through vents and fissures in ways that maintain the chemical balance that makes life possible. The same volcanic activity that put CO2 into the Jurassic atmosphere also put nutrients into the Jurassic soils. The same subduction that created arc volcanoes also recycled oceanic crust, taking the carbonate shells of marine organisms back down into the mantle, and eventually returning their carbon to the atmosphere in new volcanic emissions. The Earth was cycling its materials through, performing the deep metabolism of a living planet and the creatures on its surface, including the dinosaurs, including the insects, including the first small mammals, including whatever you are in this dreaming moment, were part of that cycle. You are made of material that was once in the Jurassic Earth. Some of the atoms in your body have been through this world, in different arrangements, in different forms, but here. They were in volcanic gases, once. They were in ancient seas. They were in the bodies of creatures whose names we do not know because we have not yet found their fossils, or whose fossils we have found and cataloged and numbered and filed away in museum drawers against the day when someone wants to know what the Jurassic world was made of. It was made of the same things you are made of. It was made of the same things that everything, everywhere, is made of. And tonight, in the warm dark of the Jurassic, those materials have assembled themselves into the particular temporary pattern that is you, and that pattern is resting, and the deep earth is doing its deep work beneath you, and both things are perfectly correct. The world is alive beneath you. It has always been alive beneath you. Let its living warmth hold you as you drift. Chapter 5, INSECTS, the Ancient Empire of the Small. Before we talk about the dinosaurs, and we will talk about them, of course, we will give them their due, we must talk about the insects. Because the insects were here first. Not just before the dinosaurs' ancestors' ancestors' ancestors, before the first reptile pulled itself from the water, before the first amphibian, before the first fish with lungs. Insects had been on land for perhaps 150 million years before the Jurassic began. They had diversified into an extraordinary array of forms, had colonized every ecological niche that terrestrial life could offer, had evolved flight, the great trick, the thing that opened the three-dimensional world of the air to small bodies for the first time, and had built, through sheer numbers and diversity, the most successful empire life on land has ever produced. The insects of the Jurassic were not entirely familiar to modern eyes, but they were recognizably insectant. They had the basic plan that insects still follow today: 6 legs, 3 body segments, an exoskeleton of chitin, compound eyes, antennae. The details varied enormously. There were dragonflies, though not the modern species, Jurassic dragonflies that were similar in plan to their modern counterparts but different in specifics. Their wings perhaps slightly different in venation, their hunting behavior perhaps slightly different in detail. The Jurassic night air was full of flying insects, as the Jurassic days were full of them. There were beetles. Beetles are the great success story of insect evolution, and by the Jurassic they had already been diversifying for tens of millions of years, producing the extraordinary variety that led the evolutionary biologist J.B.S. Haldane to remark, when asked what could be inferred about God from a study of creation, that the Creator appeared to have an inordinate fondness for beetles. Jurassic beetles bored through the wood of fallen trees, ate the roots of living plants, preyed on other insects, consumed the carcasses of dead animals, occupied every conceivable niche that a small, armored, variable body could fit into. There were flies, though not the same species as today. The Jurassic was rich in diptera, the 2-winged insects in various forms, from the primitive to the relatively derived. They buzzed around carcasses and dung and wet soil. They laid their eggs in the bodies of living animals, their larvae consuming flesh from the inside. They carried microbes on their bodies as they moved from surface to surface, from the decomposing to the living and back again, creating the same invisible networks of microbial transfer that modern flies create, but in a world without any immune system, evolved to deal specifically with the pathogens these particular flies carried. There were wasps and early relatives of bees and ants, or rather, the ancestors of ants, the wasp-like creatures that had not yet, in the Jurassic, fully committed to the eusocial colonial life that would eventually make the ant family one of the dominant forces in terrestrial ecosystems. The evolution of flowering plants, which would eventually drive the great expansion of bee diversity, was still in its early days or had not yet begun in the Jurassic. The dominant plant pollination relationships were with different insects, and the insect communities reflected this. What does all of this mean for you, lying on the warm Jurassic ground? It means that you are in the middle of an insect empire. The air around you is full of things on wing. The ground beneath you, beneath the layer of leaf litter and soil that cushions you, is full of tunnels and chambers and the endless industry of underground insect communities. The bark of every nearby tree is a vertical ecosystem of its own, with bark beetles and their larvae, and the fungi they farm, and the predatory beetles that hunt them, and the parasitic wasps that parasitize the parasitic beetles. Every leaf above you is a small world, grazed on its surface, mined through its interior by leaf miners, colonized by galls induced by tiny wasps injecting their eggs into plant tissue, patrolled by predatory insects looking for whatever is eating the leaves. This is not threatening in the immediate physical sense. Insects, even large ones, are not going to kill you tonight in the way that the great marine reptiles we discussed would kill you in the sea. They are too small, most of them, to cause serious physical harm. They bite, some of them. They sting. The wasps and early wasp relatives of the Jurassic were capable of stinging, and the experience of being stung by a Jurassic insect is unlikely to have been appreciably different from the experience of being stung by a modern wasp. Sudden, localized pain, inflammation, the brief but intense conviction that the offending creature has made a grievous personal error that you would very much like to correct. But the danger of Jurassic insects, as with so many dangers in this ancient world, was more subtle than immediate pain. The insects were vectors. They moved between organisms, and in moving they carried things. They carried plant diseases. They carried the eggs of parasites. They carried bacteria and viruses that had co-evolved with Jurassic organisms over millions of years, tuned to the immune systems and cell receptors of those specific organisms, but potentially capable, in the way that zoonotic diseases are capable in the modern world, of jumping to new hosts, new bodies, new immunological landscapes. A Jurassic mosquito, if what existed in the Jurassic were enough like modern mosquitoes to bear the comparison, and some early mosquito relatives did exist, feeding on the blood of a large sauropod, and then feeding on a human would carry Jurassic blood-borne pathogens into a body that had no evolved defenses against them. The implications of this are best not dwelt upon at length, particularly when we are trying to sleep. Suffice it to say that the microbial passengers of Jurassic insects were part of the danger that made this world genuinely, comprehensively more dangerous than dinosaurs alone. But the sound of the insects. This is worth dwelling on because it is a sound that exists across all of time, in all terrestrial ecosystems wherever conditions allow. The insects of the Jurassic night produced sound. Crickets or cricket-like creatures chirped their songs in the undergrowth, not necessarily the same species as modern crickets, but the same general principle. Stridulation, the rubbing of body parts against each other to produce sound, used for communication, used for mate attraction, used for establishing territory in the dark. The sonic world of the Jurassic night was full of insect voices. Close your eyes, listen. From across 200 million years, through the silence of deep time, comes the sound of a world alive with the small and the tireless. Chirp, chirp, a pause, chirp again. Somewhere further away, a different pattern, faster, more insistent, then slower, then gone. The insect chorus of the ancient night is the oldest music. It predates every instrument that human hands have ever built. It predates the human ear that eventually evolved to hear it. It was playing long before anything existed that could have an opinion about whether it was beautiful. It is beautiful. Let it surround you in the Jurassic dark. The small empire is all around you, and you are a guest in it, a temporary witness to a world that will continue without needing your presence, without noticing your absence, with the magnificent indifference of something so vast and so varied that any single body, human or dinosaur or pterosaur or tiny Jurassic mammal, is simply one more body among countless billions, here and then not here and then here in different forms, endlessly. The insects sing. The night is warm. You are held in both. Chapter 6. The plants a green world unlike our own. There are no flowers. This is the first thing, perhaps the most striking thing, that would confront a visitor from the modern world arriving in the Jurassic and looking at the vegetation. The world is green, emphatically, profoundly, comprehensively green. It is not lacking in plant life. In many regions, the Jurassic landscape was one of the most productive in terms of plant biomass that the world has ever seen. Vast forests of enormous conifers, dense undergrowths of ferns and horsetails and cycads, a green so intense and uniform that it would have the quality of abstraction, of wallpaper rather than landscape. But no flowers, no roses, no lilies, no dandelions on the edge of a dirt road, their seed heads lifting in a passing breeze. No apple blossoms, no cherry trees in spring bloom, no wildflower meadows with their constant motion and color and the humming of pollinators. The angiosperms, the flowering plants that dominate the modern world, that have diversified into nearly 300,000 species and colonized every terrestrial habitat on the planet from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest floor, had not yet evolved in the Jurassic. Or if they had, they were at most in their earliest, most primitive beginnings, not yet the world-conquering dynasty they would become. The Jurassic world was the world of gymnosperms, conifers of extraordinary variety, not the familiar pines and spruces and firs that modern conifers include, but their Jurassic predecessors and cousins, Araucarias, of which the modern monkey puzzle tree is a surviving representative, a living fossil connecting your world to this one, podocarps, ginkgos. The ginkgo deserves special mention because ginkgo trees existed in the Jurassic in many species, and one of those species, Ginkgo biloba, still exists today. When you look at a ginkgo tree in a modern park or garden, with its fan-shaped leaves and its distinctive two-lobe structure, you are looking at something that was here, in the Jurassic world you are currently inhabiting. It is an extraordinary thing to contemplate, that one species, through the random luck of evolutionary survival, has persisted through 200 million years of change, through the asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs, through the ice ages, through everything, and still exists to spread its particular fan-shaped leaves in the light of a very different sun. Cycads were everywhere in the Jurassic. These are plants that look somewhat like palms but are not palms. They are more ancient, more primitive in their structure, gymnospermous, with large compound fronds and a central trunk, producing seeds in massive cones at the center of their crowns. They are slow-growing, long-lived, and in the Jurassic they formed a significant portion of the vegetation in many regions, particularly in drier and more open areas. The cycad forests of the Jurassic, with their palm-like silhouettes and their heavy, compact, almost architectural forms, would have been beautiful in a severe way, a landscape of emphatic geometry rather than the flowing complexity of a modern forest. Ferns. The Jurassic world was full of ferns, not decorative garden ferns, not the gentle understory ferns of a modern temperate forest, but vast tree ferns that could reach several meters in height, and ground ferns that covered everything below the tree canopy in continuous, unbroken green. After the extinction event at the Triassic-Jurassic boundary, ferns had been among the first colonizers. They spread rapidly across disturbed areas, across ash plains and recovering soils, their spores dispersed by wind to every corner of the world, germinating in conditions that other plants could not yet tolerate. The fern spike in the fossil record, that layer of sediment where fern spores dominate and everything else is absent, is a geological signature of catastrophe and recovery, the pattern that follows every major disruption. Horsetails grew in the wet areas, along streams and rivers and in swampy margins, as they have grown in wet areas for 300 million years. The Jurassic horsetails were sometimes larger than their modern counterparts, but the same basic body plan: jointed green stems, tiny scale-like leaves, the whole plant green rather than relying on large leaf surfaces for photosynthesis. They were not the dominant vegetation of the Jurassic, but they were a persistent presence wherever water collected. What are the dangers in this plant world? They are real, if quiet. Many Jurassic plants were defended against the extraordinary herbivory pressure they faced from the dinosaurs, the great sauropods that browsed their tops, the ornithischians that grazed their undergrowths. Cycads in particular are known, even among modern species, to contain powerful neurotoxins, psychocin and related compounds, which can cause liver damage, neurodegenerative disease, and death in mammals that consume them without the specific adaptations that allow cycad specialists to process the toxins. A human eating Jurassic cycad without knowing what it was, without knowing to leach it or ferment it, or process it in the specific ways that traditional human cultures discovered empirically over centuries of potentially fatal trial and error, would be in serious trouble. Some conifers contain toxic compounds in their resin and bark. Some ferns contain thiaminase, an enzyme that destroys vitamin B1, and eating large quantities of certain ferns leads to progressive thiamine deficiency, neurological symptoms, eventually fatal. The plant world of the Jurassic was not a supermarket with clearly labeled nutritional information. It was a chemical landscape of extraordinary complexity, and most of it was not labeled at all. But the smell of it, the smell of the Jurassic plant world. Without flowers, without the rose perfume and jasmine sweetness and lilac headiness that we associate with spring and with things blooming, the Jurassic air had a different character. It smelled of resin. Conifers produce resin in prodigious quantities, and the smell of conifer resin, sharp, clean, slightly medicinal, the smell of pine forests on a hot day, permeated the Jurassic world. Amber, which preserves so many Jurassic and Cretaceous insects and plant fragments and occasionally other things, is fossilized resin, tree sap that hardened and polymerized over millions of years into the warm, golden, translucent mineral that we find beautiful. When you hold a piece of amber, you are holding a sample of Jurassic or Cretaceous smell, the resinous perfume that was the dominant scent of a world without flowers. There was also the smell of ferns crushed underfoot, green, sharp, vegetable, slightly acidic. The smell of wet earth after rain in a Jurassic forest, which would have been very similar to the smell of wet earth after rain in a modern forest, because the chemistry of soil decomposition is old enough to predate the Jurassic. The smell of cycad cones, large and complex, producing whatever chemical signals they used to communicate with their pollinators, not bees, because bees had not yet evolved, but other insects, Jurassic insects that have long since gone extinct, who were adapted to exactly this smell and no other. The Jurassic world smelled different from your world, resinous, green, warm and slightly humid. Not unpleasant, in fact, rather beautiful in the way that a forest in summer always smells beautiful, because our bodies recognize something in that smell, something ancient and reassuring about the presence of plants and oxygen and the active processing of sunlight into life. You are lying in a world of green, of ancient green, of the deep ancestral green from which all later forests are descended. Above you, the stars pass slowly through their ancient patterns. The conifer canopy stirs in a warm Jurassic wind, and the resin smell rises and falls with it. Breathe it in. Chapter 7. The Dinosaurs, finally, the dinosaurs. We have been patient. We have breathed the different air and felt the different warmth and listened to the insects and smelled the ancient forests and contemplated the warm sea and its extraordinary inhabitants. We have earned the dinosaurs. And now here they are. But perhaps not in the form you expect. The popular imagination of the Jurassic tends toward the dramatic and the spectacular. The Tyrannosaurus, which was actually Cretaceous, not Jurassic, a distinction we will address shortly. The Velociraptor, also Cretaceous, and also much smaller and more feathered than popular culture suggests. The great confrontations of enormous predators and enormous prey, nature as perpetual spectacle, as combat documentary. The reality was more complex. The Jurassic dinosaur world was diverse and nuanced and full of creatures that were doing the quiet, undramatic work of simply living, eating, sleeping, growing, reproducing, trying to stay warm or cool, navigating the social structures of their herds or solitary ranges or nesting grounds. The dramatic moments were real, and they were extraordinary, but they were embedded in long stretches of the ordinary, just as the dramatic moments of any life are embedded in long stretches of the ordinary. Let us begin with the sauropods, because they are perhaps the most purely Jurassic of all dinosaurs, and because their sheer physical presence in the Jurassic world was so overwhelming that to understand them is to understand something essential about what this world was. The sauropods were the largest animals that have ever lived on land, not just in the Jurassic. In all of land life's history on this planet, the sauropods represent the upper limit of what terrestrial biology can achieve in terms of body mass. They were long-necked, long-tailed, with barrel-shaped bodies and pillar-like legs, and they grew to sizes that strain credulity even when they are measured and calculated and confirmed in multiple fossils from multiple locations. Brachiosaurus from the late Jurassic of North America and Africa reached perhaps 13 meters in height at the head when its neck was fully extended, taller than a 4-story building. Its mass was perhaps 30 to 50 tons. It walked on 4 legs, its front legs longer than its back legs, giving its body a gentle upward slope toward the neck and head like a ramp rather than a horizontal platform. It fed on the tops of conifer trees and cycads, browsing at heights that no other animal could reach, occupying an ecological niche that was literally above the competition. Apatosaurus, long misnamed Brontosaurus, and then correctly named Apatosaurus, and then recently revalidated as Brontosaurus in a taxonomic revision that delighted the popular press, was shorter but more massively built, a front loader of the Jurassic, its neck perhaps 25 feet long, used more for horizontal reach than vertical elevation, sweeping through low vegetation the way a modern elephant might sweep with its trunk. Diplodocus was the longest, stretching to perhaps 27 meters from nose to tail tip, though much of that length was its extraordinarily elongated neck and its even more extraordinarily elongated tail, which tapered to a thin whip. The tail of Diplodocus, it has been suggested, could be moved fast enough the way you crack a whip to break the sound barrier at the tip, producing a sonic boom. Whether this was actually used as a defense or social display is speculative, but the physics appear to support the possibility, and the image of a sauropod cracking a sonic boom tail at an approaching predator is one of the most spectacular things the Jurassic has to offer. These are animals whose scale reshapes the landscape around them simply by their presence. A herd of sauropods moving through a Jurassic forest was not moving through the forest so much as the forest was moving through them. They were the fixed point, the geographic feature, and the forest had to deal with them. They knocked over trees. They stripped entire canopy sections down to bare branches. Their feet, pressing into soft ground with the force of tons of body weight per foot, created microhabitats, pools and depressions that filled with water and became breeding grounds for insects and aquatic invertebrates. Their dung, produced in quantities proportional to their size, fertilized the ground and created rich nutrient spots where plant growth accelerated. Their bodies, when they died, fed hundreds of other species for months or years. To be in the presence of a sauropod was to be in the presence of something that changes your sense of scale completely. A human standing near a feeding Brachiosaurus would be roughly equivalent in scale to a mouse standing near a horse. The sauropod would be aware of you in the way that a horse might be dimly aware of a mouse, as something small and inconsequential that occasionally moved in the peripheral vision, not a threat, not prey, simply not particularly relevant to the very large concerns of a very large body trying to consume enough vegetation to maintain itself. The danger from sauropods was not the danger of intention. They were herbivores. They had no interest in eating you. The danger was the danger of proximity to anything large and not especially aware of your existence. A sauropod tail swung in a social display or in alarm could clear a human body from its path without the sauropod noticing, the way a person walking might brush aside a piece of grass. A sauropod foot descending in the course of its normal walking gait, landing on or near a human, would be simply catastrophic in the way that a collapsing ceiling is catastrophic. Overwhelming force, no malice, no awareness, no personal element to the destruction. But tonight they are somewhere else. The sauropods are sleeping or browsing in the middle distance, their enormous bodies requiring very little actual sleep. The energy economy of a creature that size requires near constant feeding, and they likely dozed in short bursts while standing, their vast bodies too cumbersome to lie down easily and too energy expensive to stay horizontal for long. In the dark, their shapes are silhouettes against the sky, moving columns of neck and body, visible not as individuals but as a suggestion of enormous presence. Somewhere one exhales. The sound of it carries not the whistling breath of a small animal, not even the snort of a horse, but a slow, sonorous exhalation of a creature whose lungs are the size of refrigerators, whose body processes air on a scale that makes every breath a geological event by animal standards. You hear it, and it is somehow one of the most peaceful sounds you have ever heard. Something that large, breathing that slowly, in the warm dark of the Jurassic night. Let that sound come to you. Let it set the pace of your own breathing. Slow, enormous, ancient. In, out. Chapter 8, The Predator's Danger in the Dark. But of course, where there are enormous herbivores, there are predators. And the Jurassic predators deserve their own chapter, their own careful examination, their own due respect. The apex predators of the Jurassic were not Tyrannosaurus rex. That celebrity of the dinosaur world was a Cretaceous creature, living some 80 million years after the Jurassic ended, in a different world with different ecosystems and different dynamics. The Jurassic apex predators were different, though no less formidable in their context. Allosaurus is perhaps the best known of the large Jurassic carnivores, particularly of the late Jurassic of North America, where the Morrison Formation, that extraordinary geological unit that has produced so many of the most famous dinosaur fossils, preserves its remains in some abundance. Allosaurus was large, perhaps 9 to 12 meters long, several tons in weight, bipedal and predatory, with a skull designed for a distinctive bite style quite different from the crushing bite of the later Tyrannosaurus. Allosaurus had a relatively weak bite compared to some later theropods, but research suggests it may have used its strong neck muscles and sharp, blade-like teeth in a hatchet strike, driving its upper jaw downward into prey with the force of its neck rather than simply closing its jaws. The teeth were serrated, designed for slicing rather than crushing, tools for cutting meat from bone rather than shattering bone to get at marrow. For a human, Allosaurus would have been a creature of absolute, uncrossable danger. Not because of speed. The biomechanics of large theropods suggest they were not as fast as popular culture portrays them, probably not capable of running at speeds that a healthy, unencumbered human couldn't theoretically approach in a sprint. The danger was more fundamental. It was the danger of being in the presence of something that was very good at what it did, that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution for the specific purpose of detecting, pursuing, and consuming large animals, and that had no category in its perception into which a human being would fit neatly except potential food. Allosaurus had excellent binocular vision. Its eye sockets faced partially forward, giving it depth perception useful for judging distances to prey. It had a keen sense of smell, as its olfactory bulbs, preserved in endocasts of its skull, suggest. It was a visual and olfactory predator, and a human moving through its territory would have been detected, seen, smelled, tracked, long before the human was aware of being tracked. The scenario is not one of running. The scenario, if we are being physiologically honest, is one of threat display and attempted intimidation, because the evidence from modern predators suggests that large carnivores often attempt to assess prey before committing to a full attack. And a human walking upright, looking directly at the predator, perhaps making noise, might have been confusing enough, aberrant enough from expected prey profiles, to give an Allosaurus a moment of hesitation. But that moment of hesitation is not the same as safety. It is the pause before. In the dark at night, as the warm Jurassic evening settled into something cooler and the nocturnal world became more active, the large theropods may have been less active. As large ectothermic or partially ectothermic predators, they would have been more effective in the warmth of the day, their metabolisms running faster, their reactions quicker. The extent to which Jurassic theropods were ectothermic, cold-blooded, in the popular but misleading terminology, or endothermic, warm-blooded, or somewhere in between, is a matter of active scientific investigation. The current evidence suggests that many dinosaurs, including the theropods, had metabolic rates somewhere between modern reptiles and modern birds, not the torpid coldness of a resting crocodile on a cold morning, but not the constant high-temperature metabolism of a bird either. Something in between, perhaps, a metabolic compromise that gave them the advantages of both extremes without being perfectly either. At night in the Jurassic, the large predators might have been resting. They might have been digesting the previous meal, their enormous bodies processing the tons of meat they needed to fuel themselves, their metabolism running at whatever rate their particular physiology required. The night might have been safer than the day, at least from the largest predators. Safe or not safe? Because the darkness brought its own predators. The small theropods, the quick, agile ones, the Coelurus and ornitholists and their relatives, creatures perhaps 1 or 2 meters long, fast and nimble and opportunistic, were potentially more active at night. They were smaller, their metabolisms perhaps capable of being maintained at higher rates, their eyes perhaps better adapted to low-light conditions. They would have been eating small mammals, large insects, lizards, frogs, eggs, whatever the dark world offered to a quick, clever, small predator. And then there are the things we cannot see but must acknowledge, the micro-predators, the things that exist on scales below our easy perception. The parasites, the blood-sucking insects, the fungi that enter bodies through small wounds, the bacteria that colonize injury sites. These are not dramatic dangers, not the dangers that feature in adventure stories and action films. But in terms of actual mortality statistics across geological time, they are far more significant than even the largest Allosaurus. You are lying on the warm ground of the Jurassic night and the predators are out there, some large and resting, some small and active, some invisible. And the night is beautiful, and the warmth holds you. And you are, in this exact moment, not being hunted. The sound of the large predators, if you listen for it, is absence. It is the silence that happens when the nighttime chorus of insects pauses all at once, because something large has moved nearby. The insect silence is the predator's announcement, the sound of apex predation felt through the negative space of every small creature going quiet. Listen. The insects sing. They sing and sing and sing. You are not the thing that has moved. The silence is not for you. Let the insect song continue. Let it cover you like a blanket. You are safe here in the dark, with the insects singing. Chapter 9, Pterosaurus, Masters of the Jurassic Sky. Above you, against the stars, something passes. You cannot quite see it, it is dark, and the night is full, and the creature moves with the absolute silence of something that has been flying for 50 million years and has become very good at moving through air without disturbing it. But you feel the displacement, the brief shadow where a star wasn't, the sense of something between you and the sky for just a moment. A pterosaur. The pterosaurs were the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight. Not just gliding, not the way a flying squirrel glides, or a flying snake undulates downward through the air in a controlled fall, but true, active, wing-beating flight. They achieved this some 50 million years before the first bird evolved from its theropod dinosaur ancestors, and they occupied the skis for the entire reign of the dinosaurs, from the Triassic through the Cretaceous, 250 million years of flight. The Jurassic pterosaurs were diverse and fascinating. They ranged from small, sparrow to crow-sized creatures, Pterodactylus, whose genus name has become the popular term for all pterosaurs, was actually a small, late Jurassic form, with a wingspan of perhaps 30 to 40 centimeters in some species, to much larger forms. Dimorphodon from the early Jurassic of England had a wingspan of about 1.4 meters and a strikingly large head for its body size, with a deep, parrot-like beak and eyes adapted for. Some researchers have suggested active predation. Ramphorhynchus from the late Jurassic had a long tail ending in a diamond-shaped vein that may have helped stabilize flight, sharp teeth angled outward for snatching fish from the water, and the fishing bird niche with characteristic Jurassic competence. The flying membrane of pterosaurs was not feathers and not the skin-stretched wing of a bat. It was a wing composed largely of a membrane of skin, muscle, and other soft tissues, stretched between an enormously elongated fourth finger and the body and legs. Recent research has revealed that pterosaur wings were not simple membranes, but complex, multi-layered structures with internal fibers, actinofibrils, that gave them stiffness and resilience, more like a modern sail with battens than a simple piece of skin. The wings were controlled by muscles in the shoulder and along the leading edge, allowing the animal to adjust camber and shape in flight with remarkable precision. The flight of pterosaurs was different from the flight of birds, and probably different from the flight of bats. The biomechanics suggest that many pterosaurs were excellent gliders and efficient soaring flyers, riding thermals and sea breezes with minimal flapping, an energy-efficient strategy that allowed them to cover large distances without expending excessive metabolic energy. Smaller pterosaurs were more actively flapping flyers, hunting insects and small prey with the quick, maneuverable flight of a modern tern or swallow. What would they have been doing tonight? Some pterosaurs were probably diurnal, active during the day, resting at night. Others may have been crepuscular, active at dawn and dusk. Some, particularly those with adaptations suggesting hunting in low light, may have been nocturnal. The one passing above you now, a shadow against the stars, a brief displacement of air, the suggestion of something present and then gone, may have been hunting the insects that are singing around you, catching them on the wing with its sharply toothed jaws, its eyes adapted to gather every photon the starlit sky offers. Pterosaurs roosted on cliffs and trees, likely hanging upside down in the manner of bats, their wings folded into compact packages against their bodies, their lightweight bones hollow, like bird bones, for weight reduction, requiring no enormous support structure. A roosting colony of pterosaurs in a sea cliff above the warm Jurassic Ocean would have been loud and social and complex. Pterosaurs were likely social animals, as evidenced by the fossil bone beds that sometimes preserve multiple individuals together, and as suggested by the elaborate crests that many species possessed, structures useful mainly for visual display and communication. The crests of pterosaurs were extraordinary. Not all species had them, but many did, and the diversity of form is staggering. Flat, triangular crests rising from the skull, bony projections extending forward and backward to create elongated head profiles, keeled ridges running along the top of the skull, soft tissue crests extending the bony structures further. The function of these crests is debated. Thermoregulation, species recognition, sexual selection, visual display, all have been suggested, and perhaps all played some role in different contexts for different species. The crests were likely brightly colored in life, as the crests of modern birds are colored, making pterosaur colonies even more visually spectacular than the bones alone suggest. Above you, the one that passed is gone, hunting or resting or simply moving from one perch to another. But others are up there, in the dark between the stars, doing the quiet work of the night. The sky has always had things flying in it, since the pterosaurs first took to the air in the Triassic. The sky you look up at from your bed, from your windowsill, from any outdoor space at night, has had wings in it for 250 million years. The tradition of powered flight is older than flowers, older than grass, older than the first bird. Look up at the stars. Something was up there once. Something was always up there. Let the dark sky and its invisible flyers be the ceiling of the place you are falling asleep in now. Let the warmth of the Jurassic night be your blanket. Let the stars, so many more of them than you can see in the light-polluted skies of your era, be your nightlight. You are beneath the oldest flight path in the world. Sleep. Chapter 10. The MAMMALS, your ANCSTORS in the dark. They are here too, though you might not see them. They are small. They are careful. They are extremely good at not being seen by things that would eat them. They are, in every relevant sense, the opposite of the sauropods we described earlier. Where the sauropods were visible because they could not be otherwise, The mammals of the Jurassic were invisible because their survival depended on it. The mammals of the Jurassic were the inheritors of a long and troubled lineage. The mammal-like reptiles of the Permian and Triassic, the synapsids, the therapsids, the cynodonts, had been among the dominant animals of the pre-dinosaur world, and the in-Permian extinction had nearly erased them. The survivors had spent the Triassic recovering, diversifying cautiously in the ecological shadow of the increasingly dominant archosaurs, the group that includes dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and crocodilians. By the time the Jurassic began, the true mammals had emerged, small and nocturnal and already expert at survival in the margins. Morganeucodon is one of the earliest true mammals, with fossils from the early Jurassic of Wales and China, a creature roughly the size of a modern shrew, perhaps 10 centimeters long from nose to tail base, weighing perhaps 20 grams. It was probably insectivorous, as the small, complex, differentiated teeth suggest, the precise, interlocking teeth of a mammal, capable of cutting insect exoskeletons and extracting nutrition from small, hard-bodied prey with a precision that reptilian teeth cannot match. It was probably nocturnal. It was probably warm-blooded, or at least capable of generating and regulating its own body heat, which is one of the defining mammalian capabilities, and which opened the night to mammals at a time when the dominant reptilian world was largely dependent on solar heating. The night was the mammalian inheritance. When the dinosaurs were cooling and slowing as the sun went down, the mammals were warming and quickening. Their metabolically expensive warm-bloodedness, which required them to eat prodigious quantities of food relative to their body size, compared to ectothermic reptiles of equivalent mass, was the price of access to the nocturnal world, the world of activity after dark, the world where large predatory reptiles were less efficient and small warm-blooded insectivores could find food without being found. Throughout the Jurassic, mammal diversity increased. New groups evolved and diversified. Docodonts, an extinct mammal group known mainly from isolated teeth, but reconstructed in more detail from exceptional Chinese fossils, evolved into ecological roles that included burrowing, swimming, and tree climbing, showing that mammalian diversity and ecological experimentation was already underway in the Jurassic even at small body sizes. Multituberculates, a group that would eventually become very successful and persist all the way through the Cretaceous extinction, were beginning to emerge, their complex, multi-cusped teeth adapted for processing seeds and other plant foods as well as insects. The Jurassic mammals were experiments. They were trying things out, different body plans, different ecological roles, different metabolic strategies, in the cautious, careful way that the small and vulnerable try things out, with good escape routes and a constant awareness of what is larger than them. They are here tonight in the undergrowth. You can almost hear them if you listen very carefully past the insect chorus, the faint scurrying, the brief crackle of a leaf underfoot, the quick stop and listen of a small creature that has heard something and is assessing whether it is dangerous. The tiny heartbeat, much faster than yours, of a creature that metabolizes at a rate you cannot sustain, burning through its small body with the intensity of something that has very little time and knows it. They are your ancestors. Not directly, the lineage from Morganeucodon to you is extraordinarily long and involves many branches and dead ends and redirections. But in the general sense, you are a mammal. You descend from creatures like this. Your warm-bloodedness, your fur expressed now as hair, your complex differentiated teeth, your 3 middle ear bones that once were jaw bones, your placenta or your nursing ability. These are all inheritance from creatures that were here in the Jurassic dark, small and careful and alive with a particular kind of warm-blooded intensity. The Jurassic night was their night. It became the night of mammals. Eventually, after many catastrophes and recoveries and diversifications and extinctions, it became the night of creatures that could look up at the stars and wonder what they were. You are the inheritor of a dynasty that began here, in the undergrowth, in the warm Jurassic dark, eating insects and trying not to be eaten. You have come a long way. You are also in this moment, doing what your ancestors did in this exact landscape, resting in the dark, your body processing the day, your consciousness releasing its grip on the world one thought at a time, preparing for the small resurrection that sleep always is. The small mammals rustle in the undergrowth around you. They are safe tonight. The large predators are elsewhere. The night is quiet enough. Your deepest evolutionary memory recognizes this safety. The part of you that is made of Jurassic nights, that carries 200 million years of successful nocturnal survival in its neural architecture, recognizes the quality of this darkness, this warmth, this insect song, this absence of immediate threat. It says rest. You have been running and hiding, and eating and running some more for 200 million years. Tonight you can rest. Chapter 11. The rivers and the rain, fresh water in the ancient world. Water moves through the Jurassic world in ancient patterns. The rivers of the Jurassic did not follow the courses of modern rivers. Those courses are the products of 100 million years of erosion and tectonic movement and climate change that had not yet happened when we are. The Jurassic rivers followed different gradients, drained different mountains, emptied into different seas. But rivers are rivers. They follow gravity. They carve their beds through the softest available rock. They carry sediment from highland to lowland and deposit it in delta fans and floodplains and shallow lakes. The physics of water on a slope is the same physics it has always been and will always be. Along the rivers of the Jurassic, life was rich and varied. Freshwater ecosystems are among the most productive on the planet, the meeting point of terrestrial and aquatic worlds, the place where nutrients from the land wash down and concentrate, supporting dense communities of invertebrates and fish, and the things that eat them. The Jurassic rivers had fish, primitive fish, ray-finned fish from groups that have diversified extensively since, but whose Jurassic representatives were already recognizably fish-shaped and fish-functional. They had freshwater clams and snails. They had the larvae of many of the insects we've already discussed, living their aquatic juvenile phases in the river water before metamorphosing into the aerial adults. They had crayfish-like creatures, freshwater crustaceans that occupied the bottom-dweller niche. Large animals came to the rivers to drink. The sauropods we described earlier drank enormous quantities of water, maintaining that much body mass in a warm world required constant hydration, and the riverbeds and floodplains preserve many sauropod trackways that suggest the animals moved regularly toward water sources. The stegosaurs, which we have not yet described but will come to shortly, came to drink. The smaller dinosaurs came to drink and to hunt the creatures that gathered near water. And the crocodilians were here. This is important. The crocodilians of the Jurassic were not only the ancestors of modern crocodiles, but were, in some respects, more diverse than their modern descendants. There were terrestrial crocodilians, lightly built, long-legged forms that hunted on land rather than lurking at water's edges. There were marine crocodilians, which we will discuss in a moment. And there were the semi-aquatic, ambush predator crocodilians that most closely resemble their modern relatives. The ones that lay still in shallow water, barely visible, completely patient, waiting for something large and thirsty to approach the bank. The crocodilian ambush is one of the oldest and most effective predatory strategies in vertebrate life. It requires patience, camouflage, and explosive power at the moment of commitment, and crocodilians have been executing it for 250 million years without significant modification, which is about the strongest possible endorsement any strategy can receive. A Jurassic crocodilian lying in the shallows of a warm Jurassic river, its eyes and nostrils just above the waterline, its body invisible in the turbid water or the shadow of an overhanging bank. This was danger in its most patient, most invisible form. Rain was common in the Jurassic. The warm climate drove intense evaporation from the warm oceans, and that moisture had to come down somewhere. The Jurassic world was not uniformly wet. There were dry, arid regions, particularly in the interiors of the large landmasses where the distance from ocean moisture sources created conditions more like modern deserts. But the coastal regions, the low-lying areas, the river valleys, these were wet. The rain came in sheets. In the warm tropical way that rain falls when the atmosphere is carrying as much moisture as it possibly can and finally, inevitably, releases it. The sound of Jurassic rain on a Jurassic forest. This is a sound that needs no translation, no adjustment for the distance of deep time. Rain falling on leaves sounds the same now as it sounded then, because leaves and rain are governed by the same physics. The stippling of drops on broad fronds, the rivulets that form along the central vein of a leaf and fall from its tip in a steady drip. The deep bass note of large drops on the flat surface of a cycad frond, and the high treble note of small drops on pine needles, and the general percussion of it all, the whole orchestra of a rainstorm in a forest that has no windows, no walls, no roof, just the canopy, the increasingly rain-dark canopy and the sound. The smell of rain on warm ground. Petrichor, the smell produced when rain falls on dry earth, releasing the oils deposited by plants and the compounds produced by bacteria in the soil. Actinomycetes, a group of bacteria that decompose organic matter in the soil, produce geosmin, which is the primary component of that earthy, rain-on-dry ground smell. These bacteria were in Jurassic soils as they are in all soils. When Jurassic rain fell on Jurassic dry ground, it smelled of petrichor, the same smell. 200 million years of the same smell. You know this smell. You have always known it. It is encoded in your appreciation of the world at a level so deep that it might be genetic. The smell that says water is here, the drought is ending, the plants will grow, the world is replenishing itself. It is a deeply comforting smell, and it is exactly the same in the Jurassic as it will be in any other era. And right now, somewhere in the warm dark around you, rain has fallen recently on warm ground, and the petrichor is faint but present on the air. Breathe it in. Let it be the oldest comfort. Rain has come, and the world is wet again, and everything that lives here is glad of it. The river runs nearby, swollen a little by the rain, carrying its cargo of ancient sediment toward an ancient sea. The river does not know that one day the sea it empties into will be gone, lifted and folded into mountains by the slow collision of continents. The river does not know anything. It is water in a groove in the ground, following its gradient with absolute fidelity. It has been doing this for as long as there has been a groove, and it will do it until the groove is gone. The sound of running water. The oldest sound, perhaps, of all, older than insects, older than dinosaurs, going back to the first rains on the young Earth 4 billion years ago. Let it carry you. Chapter 12. STGUSAURS, the PLATDMYSTRIS. We have not yet given proper attention to the stegosaurs, and they deserve it, because they are among the most visually extraordinary creatures that ever lived, and because they represent a fascinating problem in paleontology that makes them even more interesting than their appearance alone suggests. Stegosaurus and its relatives, the stegosaurs as a group, were ornithischian dinosaurs, the broad-hipped dinosaurs, herbivores, all of them. They were large animals, in the case of Stegosaurus reaching perhaps 9 meters in length and perhaps 3 to 4 tons in weight. They walked on 4 legs, with the characteristic stegosaur posture. Rear legs significantly longer than front legs, giving the body a strongly arched profile, the highest point well behind center. The head carried low near the ground, and the hindquarters elevated, almost like a very slow wave breaking from back to front. But it is the back plates that demand attention. Running along the spine of Stegosaurus, in 2 alternating rows, were 17 bony plates, large, upright, kite-shaped structures made of bone but covered in life with a layer of skin, perhaps with blood vessels running through that skin, perhaps with a covering of keratin similar to the material in horn and hoof and nail. The largest plates over the hips and lower back could be nearly a meter tall and almost as wide, not weapons, not armor in the conventional sense. The plates were not fused to the spine, not braced against impact. They were freestanding, relatively fragile for their size, but something else, something more complex. The function of the stegosaur plates has been debated since the first Stegosaurus was described in the 1870s. Armor was the first assumption, but the biomechanics don't support it. The plates were positioned in ways that left the flanks and undersides exposed, and the bone structure suggests they could not have absorbed significant impact forces without fracturing. Thermoregulation was proposed. The plates might have functioned like solar panels and cooling fins, absorbing heat in the morning and radiating it away in the afternoon, allowing the animal to maintain a more stable body temperature in the warm Jurassic world. The vascular channels in the bones support this hypothesis to some degree. The blood flowing through the plates could have been warmed or cooled depending on the animal's needs. But more recently, sexual selection and species recognition have become the favored interpretations. The plates as display structures, visible from a distance, perhaps capable of flushing with blood to change color, used to identify members of the same species and to impress potential mates or intimidate rivals. The two hypotheses are not mutually exclusive. Natural selection rarely produces structures with only one function when a structure can serve multiple purposes simultaneously. The tail of Stegosaurus was armed with 4 large spikes, the thagomizer, in the delightful term that the paleontological community formally adopted from a Far Side cartoon. These spikes were real weapons, oriented horizontally and capable of being swept in an arc with the considerable force that a multi-ton tail could generate. Evidence of their use exists in the fossil record. An Allosaurus tail vertebra with a circular hole the precise size and shape of a Stegosaurus tail spike, healed around the edges in a way that suggests the Allosaurus survived the encounter, at least for a while. An Allosaurus pubic bone from the same formation with similar damage. The thagomizer was not decorative, it was tested. But standing near a Stegosaurus in the early evening, as the light fades and the creature grazes with the low sweeping motion of its head, eating ferns and low-growing cycads, and whatever the low vegetation offers, this would not have felt primarily dangerous. It would have felt, above all, alien. The combination of enormous body, tiny head, the brain of Stegosaurus was roughly the size of a dog's brain, in a body 40 times larger than a dog. The plates catching and fragmenting the late light, the slow, deliberate movements of a creature that has no reason to hurry because nothing is threatening it, and it has all the evening ahead of it to eat. This is not a creature you can easily categorize. It doesn't fit comfortably into any mental schema derived from the modern world. It is its own thing, a particular solution to the problem of being a large herbivore in the Jurassic, with its own logic and its own beauty, its own way of occupying space that is unmistakably its own. The plated silhouette, backlit by the last light of the Jurassic sun, is something you would carry with you, if you were carrying things. But you are not. You are here, settling, and the stegosaur is there, and the distance between you is exactly right, and the night is coming. The plates are the last things visible as the dark comes, those tall, irregular shapes, rising and falling with the profile of the animal, catching starlight, paler than the surrounding darkness, slowly moving away into the night. Watch them go. Let them go. Let the dark reclaim them. The night is theirs. Chapter 13, Microbes, the Invisible Empire. We have been building to this, and it is time. The most dangerous things in the Jurassic world were not the Allosaurus or the pliosaurs or even the volcanic eruptions. They were invisible. They were in every breath of warm air, in every sip of river water, in the soil under every footstep, in the saliva of every insect that might bite, in the lining of every gut where digestion happened. They were the microbes, bacteria, viruses, archaea, fungi, protists, and they are, and will always be the true rulers of every ecosystem that has ever existed on Earth. The Jurassic microbial world was, in terms of diversity and ecological importance, probably not very different from the modern microbial world. Microbes evolve very quickly. Their generation times are hours or days rather than years, meaning that in the same amount of time that a large organism undergoes one generation, a microbial population can undergo thousands, accruing evolutionary changes at a rate that makes the evolution of complex animals look glacial by comparison. But this rapid evolution happens against a backdrop of deep conservation. The basic microbial strategies that existed 2 billion years ago, when the first bacteria were establishing the template for all cellular life, are still in use today. Fermentation, respiration, photosynthesis, chemolithotrophy. The fundamental biochemical transactions of life are as old as life itself. What this means in practical terms is that the Jurassic microbial world contained pathogens. It contained bacteria capable of causing infection in animal bodies. It contained viruses capable of hijacking animal cells and using them to reproduce. It contained fungi capable of causing disease in both plants and animals. And these pathogens had co-evolved for hundreds of millions of years with the specific organisms they infected. The Jurassic dinosaurs and pterosaurs and marine reptiles and plants, tuned to those specific hosts, familiar with their immune systems, their cell receptors, their metabolic vulnerabilities. A human immune system, arrived in the Jurassic, would encounter these pathogens without the specific adaptive immune responses that would normally protect against them. The human immune system is good, extraordinarily good, actually, one of the most complex and capable systems that evolution has produced, but its capabilities are calibrated by evolutionary history, by the pathogens that human ancestors encountered over millions of years of their own existence. Jurassic pathogens fall outside that calibration. The antibodies that would normally neutralize them don't exist in a human immune system because those antibodies are produced by exposure, and no human has ever been exposed to these specific pathogens. This is, in some ways, the most genuinely terrifying aspect of the Jurassic, not the Allosaurus, which you can see and hear and run from briefly, not the warm sea and its reptilian predators, which you can avoid by staying out of the water. The microbes, you would breathe them in, you would drink them, you would have them enter through any small cut or abrasion, and your body would engage with them using weapons evolved for different battles, like a soldier sent to fight with the weapons of a previous century. But here is the thing about microbes, and the thing that allows us to continue resting rather than panicking about invisible threats. Most microbes are not pathogens. Most microbes, even in the Jurassic, were going about their business in ways entirely indifferent to the presence of a human body. Decomposers breaking down dead plant material in the soil had no particular interest in invading living tissue. Photosynthetic cyanobacteria in the river water were running their solar energy collection systems with no concern for mammalian immune responses. The nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil, converting atmospheric nitrogen into forms that plants could use, were engaged in one of the most ecologically important processes on the planet and were not interested in you at all. The danger from Jurassic microbes was real but not immediate. It would have accumulated over time, as exposure accumulated, and as the immune system struggled to mount responses to novel threats. On a single night, on the warm ground in the insect's song, you are safe from the invisible empire too. They are all around you, as they are always all around every body in every era. But tonight, in the slow equilibrium of the dark, they are not your concern. Let that thought settle you. The invisible world is vast, and it is ancient, and it is indifferent to you in the most fundamental way, which is the same as saying it is not hunting you, not seeking you out, not lying in wait. The danger, such as it is statistical and temporal, spread over days and weeks rather than concentrated in a single moment of attack. Tonight, you breathe the ancient air. The microbes ride it, as they ride all air everywhere always. And you breathe them in, and your body receives them. And in the morning you will wake and your cells will still be doing their cellular work. And the Jurassic night will have passed without catastrophe. Breathe. The air is full of the oldest life. The oldest life does not wish you ill. It simply is. Chapter 14. The Jurassic Night Full Immersion. It is late now. The stars have moved, the earth has turned, slowly and continuously, carrying you with it. The point on the surface where you rest has rotated away from the direction you started facing and toward new stars, and the star patterns you noticed when the night began have shifted. In the Jurassic, the precession of the Earth's axis, the slow wobble that changes which stars appear near the poles over cycles of 26,000 years, means that the star that sits near the celestial North Pole is not the Polaris of your era. There is no single brilliant North Star tonight. The northern sky turns around a less populated region, the poles circling through stars that modern observers know by other names in other contexts. But the stars are abundant, and they are beautiful, and their ancient light has been traveling for the years or decades or centuries or millennia that light takes to cross the distances between stars, and it arrives at your eyes here in the Jurassic, and it continues its journey through your pupils and onto your retinas, and through your optic nerves, and into the parts of your brain that have been looking at stars for as long as there have been creatures capable of looking. The moon is up. It is slightly larger than the moon of your era, slightly closer, the tidal forces of its proximity not yet having slowed the Earth's rotation enough to push it as far out as it will eventually be. Its surface is the same surface it will always be, more or less. The craters are there, the maria, the dark basaltic plains that the ancients thought were actual seas, the lighter highlands. The moon has not changed significantly in 200 million years. The moon was old when the Jurassic began, and it is the same old moon now. Its light falls on the Jurassic world with the same quality it falls within your era, cool, indirect, the reflected light of the sun, making shadows softer and objects less distinct, turning the familiar into the slightly mysterious. Sauropod shapes in moonlight, the reflective plates of a distant stegosaur catching the moon, the occasional glint of water in a river or pool. The moon has always made the night world a little more navigable, a little more visible, and the Jurassic night is no exception. You are deeply warm. The ground beneath you has been releasing its stored heat for hours now, and you have been absorbing it through the length of your body, the warmth moving up through you in the slow way that warmth always moves, from surface to core, from outside to inside, until you are the same temperature as the world you're lying in, and the boundary between you and the ground is more philosophical than physical. Your breathing has slowed. You may have noticed this some chapters back, some descriptions back, somewhere in the telling of the pterosaurs or the crocodilians or the rain. Your breath has been matching the pace of the documentary's voice, slow, even unhurried. The words have been coming at the pace of a world that had all the time in the world, which is to say, all of geological time, which is to say, effectively forever. The insect chorus has not stopped. It does not stop. It is one of the constants of the Jurassic night, as it is one of the constants of any warm night in any era. The small and vital world singing itself forward into the next moment and the next and the next, the only world that has no concept of stopping. Somewhere a large animal exhales. Somewhere else, something smaller rustles through undergrowth. The river murmurs in its ancient bed. The stars wheel overhead with the patience of things that have been doing this since long before any eye existed to observe them. You are warm. You are heavy. You are in the oldest night. Chapter 15. The Morrison Formation, reading the Jurassic in stone. Every once in a while, the Jurassic world leaves a record of itself in the rock, and we can read it. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but well enough to build the pictures we have been building here, to understand the world we have been describing with a detail that goes beyond imagination into actual evidence. The Morrison Formation is a geological unit found across a broad swath of the American West: Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and other states. It was deposited during the late Jurassic period, roughly 150 to 155 million years ago, in an environment very different from the modern American West. A semi-arid floodplain crossed by rivers and dotted with lakes, stretching inland from a mountain range to the west. The animals and plants of this environment, many of the famous dinosaurs we have discussed tonight, died and were buried in the sediment of those floodplains and rivers and lakes. And over millions of years, those sediments became rock, and the bones and teeth and wood and leaf impressions and occasional soft tissue traces became fossil. The Morrison Formation is one of the richest dinosaur fossil deposits in the world. It has produced Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus, Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Camarasaurus, Camptosaurus, and dozens of other species, along with an extraordinary fauna of smaller animals: pterosaurs, mammals, lizards, turtles, crocodilians, fish, frogs, salamanders, insects. When paleontologists study the Morrison Formation, they are reading the story of this specific time and place in the Jurassic with a level of detail that allows us to make confident statements about what was there, what it looked like, how it moved, sometimes even how it behaved. The rocks tell stories that are sometimes quiet and sometimes violent. There are trachyte surfaces where dinosaurs walked across soft mud that later hardened into stone, preserving the exact shape and size of their feet, sometimes showing the gait and walking speed as multiple prints form trackways. There are bone beds, where many animals died in the same place, perhaps around a drying water source during drought, or in a flood event that concentrated carcasses. There are individual skeletons, sometimes articulated, the bones still in roughly their life positions, suggesting rapid burial before scavengers had time to disarticulate them, and sometimes scattered, the body decomposed or was scavenged before burial, the bones carried and distributed by water and animals. Gastrolith, smooth, polished stones found in the rib cages of some Morrison dinosaurs tell us that some dinosaurs swallowed stones to help grind up plant material in their digestive systems, the way modern birds swallow grit. Bite marks on bones tell us who was eating whom, or at least who was scavenging whose remains. Pathological bones tell us about disease and injury, healed fractures, bone infections, evidence of arthritis in old individuals, the marks of life lived fully in a world that required constant physical engagement. The plants of the Morrison are preserved in pollen and spores, in fossil wood, in occasional impressions of leaves. The pollen record is particularly rich. Every plant that shed pollen left a record in the sediment, and the preserved pollen can be identified and counted, giving us a statistical picture of what plants grew in different parts of the Morrison environment. Conifers dominated the better-watered areas. Ferns were abundant near water and in disturbed areas. Cycads grew in drier, more open spots. Reading the Morrison Formation is like reading a very long, very slow book written in stone, a book that took 5 million years to write and has been being read for 150 years, and is still not fully understood. Every new excavation reveals new details. Every new specimen adds to the picture. The Jurassic world that we have been exploring tonight is not imagination. It is, at least in its broad strokes, evidence-based reconstruction, built from the patient, careful, meticulous work of generations of scientists who have spent their careers on their knees in the dirt, extracting the past from stone grain by grain. The present you inhabit was built on the past. The past is not gone. It is in the rock, waiting to be read. And the reading of it is one of the most extraordinary things that the species who evolved from those tiny Jurassic mammals has ever learned to do. You descended from creatures who lived in this world. You now understand that world with a detail that those creatures, in all their quick-eyed, warm-blooded alertness, could never have comprehended. This is a good thing to fall asleep knowing. You carry the past in your body. You understand it with your mind. The combination is a kind of wholeness, a completeness, a sense of belonging to the full extent of life's story on this planet, not just the recent chapters. Rest in that fullness. The stones remember everything. You don't have to. Chapter 16. The Tethys Sea, the ancient ocean. Let us go to the sea for a while. Not to enter it. We have established that the warm Jurassic Sea and its inhabitants represent a level of danger that makes the open ocean inadvisable for a modern visitor. But to the shore, to the edge where land and water meet, where the boundary is constantly renegotiated by waves and tides, where life clusters in extraordinary density because two worlds overlap and each brings its gifts to the junction. The Tethys Sea was the great ocean of the Jurassic world. It was not the Pacific, not the Atlantic. Both of those are younger than the Tethys, products of the Pangea breakup that was underway during the Jurassic. The Tethys was the warm, shallow, tropical ocean that lay between the northern landmass Laurasia, which would eventually become North America, Europe, and Asia, and the southern landmass Gondwana, which would eventually become South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, and the Indian subcontinent. It was shallow in many areas, rich in light and warmth, its waters the temperature of a comfortable bath, its shelves and reefs teeming with life. The Jurassic reefs were not coral reefs as we know them today. The Jurassic night never truly became silent. Even now, as you lie on the warm ancient ground beneath a sky untouched by airplanes or cities or electric light, the world continues moving around you with slow and patient purpose. Somewhere beyond the tree line, enormous bodies are shifting through the darkness. Somewhere high above, invisible wings drift between the stars. Somewhere beneath the soil, millions of tiny lives continue their endless work of decomposition and renewal. And perhaps the strangest thing about the Jurassic is not how alien it feels. It is how familiar. The wind still sounds like wind. Rain still smells like rain. Water still follows gravity through the land. The stars above you are almost the same stars that shine over the modern world tonight. The Jurassic is separated from you by 150 million years, and yet the basic heartbeat of the Earth has not changed at all. The air remains warm around your skin, heavy with moisture, thick with the smell of resin and wet leaves and dark soil. Every breath carries the scent of growing things, ferns, conifers, ancient forests drinking moonlight in silence. You realize slowly that the Jurassic world was never empty wilderness in the way modern people imagine prehistoric worlds to be. It was crowded beyond comprehension. Every surface carried life. Every tree trunk supported insects and fungi and moss-like growths. Every river contained microscopic organisms too small to see. Every patch of mud preserved footprints from creatures that passed hours earlier. The forests themselves were layered ecosystems from canopy to roots, each level occupied by something feeding, hiding, reproducing, or dying. Nothing was ever still for long. Not even the ground beneath you. The continents themselves were moving during the Jurassic, slowly, impossibly slowly, but moving nonetheless. Pangea, the great supercontinent, was tearing itself apart across millions of years. The land cracked open. New oceans formed. Volcanoes rose along spreading rifts deep beneath the sea. Entire coastlines drifted inch by inch over spans of time too large for human minds to naturally understand. And yet to the creatures living here, none of that movement would have been noticeable. A sauropod did not know the continent beneath its feet was drifting. A stegosaurus grazing beneath conifers did not know mountain ranges were slowly rising far beyond the horizon. The small mammals hidden beneath roots did not know evolution itself was reshaping the future around them. Life rarely notices history while it is happening. It simply continues. The Jurassic Earth was dangerous because everything here was alive at extraordinary scale. The forests were enormous. The rivers were enormous. The insects existed in overwhelming numbers. Even the weather felt larger than modern weather. Storm systems rolled across broad tropical landscapes with terrifying power. Warm oceans fed gigantic thunderheads that climbed high into the atmosphere. Lightning struck forests repeatedly during the wet seasons, igniting resin-heavy trees in explosive bursts of fire. Rain fell in warm sheets so thick that entire valleys disappeared behind curtains of water. And afterward came steam. The warm Jurassic ground released heat back into the cooling air. Mist rose through the forests before dawn. Ferns dripped quietly for hours after storms ended. Water gathered in the footprints of giant dinosaurs and remained there long enough for insects to breed in temporary pools. Everything in this world recycled itself rapidly. Nothing wasted energy. Nothing wasted death. A fallen sauropod became food for scavengers, insects, bacteria, and eventually the forest itself. Even enormous bodies vanished surprisingly quickly in the warm climate. Bones scattered. Flesh dissolved into ecosystems. The Earth absorbed everything back into itself with patient efficiency. Modern humans tend to think of extinction as tragedy. But the Jurassic Earth treated extinction as routine. Species appeared. Species vanished. Forests spread. Seas rose and retreated. The world changed continuously for millions of years before anything evolved capable of feeling sorrow about it. And maybe that is part of what makes the Jurassic strangely calming tonight. Because the Earth does not panic about change. The Earth adapts. The forests recover after fire. The rivers carve new channels after floods. Life returns after catastrophe again and again and again. Even the great extinction at the end of the Triassic, the catastrophe that helped dinosaurs rise to dominance, became simply another chapter in the planet's long story of collapse and renewal. The Jurassic itself existed because another world ended first. You hear movement somewhere far away in the darkness. Not sudden movement. Not aggressive movement. Something heavy simply crossing through forest. Branches crack softly beneath tremendous weight. Leaves rustle. Then silence again. Perhaps a sauropod herd moving between feeding grounds. The sound is oddly peaceful. Large animals rarely hurry unless frightened. Their size frees them from nervousness. A giant herbivore in the Jurassic did not live with the constant tension of small prey animals. The world adjusted around them. Still, even giants had enemies. Allosaurus hunted these forests. Massive theropods moved carefully through river valleys searching for vulnerable prey. Their senses were sharp, their eyesight excellent, their teeth curved and serrated for tearing flesh from bone. But predators do not spend every moment killing. Most of predator life is waiting, walking, listening, conserving energy. Even the great hunters of the Jurassic spent much of their existence simply existing beneath the same stars now hanging above you. This is something modern imagination often misunderstands about prehistoric life. The dinosaurs were not monsters. They were animals. Real animals with ordinary biological needs. They slept. They healed from injuries. They protected their young. They searched for water during droughts. They rested beneath trees during the hottest hours of the day. Some may even have played in ways we would recognize in modern animals today. The Jurassic was not endless violence. It was a functioning ecosystem. And ecosystems require balance more than chaos. The insects around you continue singing. Their chorus fills the spaces between larger sounds. endless chirping hidden throughout the undergrowth. Some species produce slow, rhythmic calls. Others buzz continuously in vibrating waves. Together, they create the ancient soundtrack of warm nights on Earth. Insects had already ruled the land long before dinosaurs arrived. And in truth, they remain among the greatest survivors the planet has ever produced. Tiny bodies, rapid reproduction, infinite adaptability. The Jurassic forests belonged as much to insects as to anything large enough to leave footprints in stone. Beetles tunneled through dead wood. Dragonflies hunted near water. Primitive flies fed on carcasses and wet soil. Early wasps searched bark and leaves for places to lay eggs. The air itself shimmered with small moving life. And hiding beneath all of it were the mammals. Your ancestors. Tiny nocturnal creatures surviving quietly in the shadow of giants. They lived in burrows and hollow logs. They waited for darkness before emerging to feed. They survived through caution and intelligence rather than strength. Without them, you would not exist. Without small, frightened mammals surviving Jurassic nights like this one, humanity never arrives. It is humbling to think about. Your lineage once weighed less than a loaf of bread. Your ancestors once hid from reptiles beneath ferns, while enormous dinosaurs shook the ground overhead. And yet somehow they endured. Against every probability, they endured long enough for human beings to someday look backward across time and wonder about worlds like this one. The night deepens for a little while longer. Clouds drift slowly across the stars. The moon hangs larger in the Jurassic sky than it does in your era because it orbited slightly closer to Earth then. Tidal forces were stronger. Days were shorter too, perhaps 23 hours rather than 24. The Earth rotated a little faster during the Jurassic, though no creature alive here could possibly notice it. Time itself feels different in this world. Human civilization measures time obsessively. Minutes, schedules, deadlines, notifications. But the Jurassic Earth measured time geologically. Forest generations, river migrations, climate cycles, continental drift. Nothing hurried here except small frightened animals. And perhaps lying in this ancient darkness reminds your nervous system of something it forgot a long time ago. Life does not always need to move quickly. The forests do not rush. The oceans do not rush. Evolution itself takes millions of years to make decisions. Even the stars overhead move with unimaginable patience. You breathe slowly. The warm air fills your lungs heavily but comfortably. The smell of wet earth surrounds you now. Somewhere nearby, rain must have fallen recently. Petrichor rises softly from the ground, that deep earthy scent created when water touches dry soil. The same smell existed in the Jurassic exactly as it exists today. Ancient bacteria in the soil produced the same compounds then as now. 200 million years separate your world from this one. And still the rain smells the same. There is something deeply comforting about that. Some truths survive every age. The river nearby moves quietly through darkness. You cannot see it clearly from where you rest, but you hear it continuously. Water slipping around stones, soft current against muddy banks, occasional splashes from unseen creatures disturbing the surface. The rivers of the Jurassic were dangerous places. Crocodilian relatives lurked near shorelines waiting for animals to approach for water. Some resembled modern crocodiles closely enough to trigger immediate recognition in a human observer. Others were stranger, longer-legged, more active on land, adapted to ecological roles modern crocodilians no longer occupy. But tonight the river sounds peaceful from a distance. The predators are hidden. The stars remain steady overhead. And for this brief moment, the ancient earth allows you to simply listen. Somewhere farther away comes another sound. A deep, resonant call echoing across the darkness. Not a roar exactly, more like a low, vibrating bellow. Perhaps communication between distant dinosaurs across forest and floodplain. Large animals often communicate over enormous distances using low-frequency sounds capable of traveling far through humid air. The call fades slowly into silence. Then the insects return again. Always the insects. The Jurassic sky above you is breathtakingly clear. Without artificial light, the stars appear in impossible numbers. The Milky Way stretches overhead like pale smoke across darkness. Constellations are familiar but subtly shifted because the stars themselves move gradually across immense spans of time. Some stars visible tonight no longer exist in your era. Their light remains traveling through space long after the stars themselves died. Even the sky carries ghosts. And beneath that sky, the Jurassic world continues breathing around you. The conifers sway gently in warm wind. Pterosaurs move invisibly above the canopy. Small mammals rustle through leaf litter. Sauropods feed somewhere in the darkness. And the earth beneath everything remains alive. Volcanic heat still rises from deep within the planet. Tectonic plates continue drifting. New ocean crust forms along spreading ridges beneath ancient seas. Mountains slowly rise while others erode grain by grain into sediment carried toward distant coastlines. The Jurassic world was not static scenery. It was an active living planet. A machine made of oceans and atmosphere and geology and biology all working together. Dangerous, beautiful, completely indifferent to whether anything survived within it. And yet life flourished anyway. That may be the greatest miracle of all. Not that life exists when conditions are easy, but that life insists on existing when conditions are difficult. The Jurassic challenged everything alive. The heat, the storms, the predators, the disease, the competition, and still forests spread across continents. Still rivers teemed with life. Still tiny mammals raised young beneath roots in the dark. Still enormous dinosaurs crossed floodplains beneath the stars. Existence continued, perhaps because life has only one true purpose: to continue. You begin to feel the ancient world growing softer around you now. Not disappearing, just becoming more distant. The way dreams slowly loosen at the edges before sleep fully takes hold. The sounds blend together. Insects, wind, water, faraway footsteps, breathing giants. The Jurassic no longer feels frightening. Not because the danger vanished, but because you stopped resisting the world around you. You became quiet enough to hear it properly. And the ancient Earth, for one brief night across millions of years, accepted your presence beneath its stars. Soon dawn will come to the Jurassic forests. Warm mist will rise through the trees. The great herbivores will continue feeding. Predators will return to movement. Pterosaurs will glide above rivers searching for fish. The endless machinery of prehistoric life will begin another day exactly as it has for millions of years. And eventually, unimaginably far in the future, this world will vanish. The continents will change. Flowering plants will spread. Birds will evolve. Mammals will rise. An asteroid will fall from the sky and rewrite the history of life forever. But tonight, none of that has happened yet. Tonight, the dinosaurs still rule the earth. Tonight, the forests still belong to cycads and conifers. Tonight, your tiny mammal ancestors still hide safely in the undergrowth. And tonight, lying beneath ancient stars on warm Jurassic ground, you are allowed to rest beside them for a little while. The insects sing softly around you. The river keeps flowing through darkness. The great dinosaurs breathe somewhere beyond the trees. And the ancient earth, old, dangerous, patient, endlessly alive, holds everything gently in its vast prehistoric night.